Katherine Mansfield is widely known for her modernist movement in her writings and especially for her short stories. The Fly is a short story which was published in 1922, dealing with the brutality of war and how a person who has lost their family members in the war survives later. How does that trauma affects them for the rest of their life? She too, Mansfield too, had lost her brother Leslie in 1915. She suffered from that unbearable grief by the loss of her brother. And in this short story, she projects how two characters, the boss and Mr. Woodyfield, both of them had lost their son in war, but how they were dealing with grief. She is diving deep into the complexities of human nature. She is so much focused on the mind of the characters, how they are capable to manage all the troubles in their life, how they are dealing with grief, how they are dealing with other people. The story starts like this. You are very snug in here, piped old Mr. Wooderfield. Snug means warm, comfortable, and cozy. He's talking to the boss, who is also his friend, and he peered out of the great green leather armchair by his friend, the boss's desk. He peered out in his green leather armchair. Green in modern literature is a symbol of renewal. It's a symbol of hope, new beginnings. But in Shakespeare's work, green was associated with jealousy. In Othello, the protagonist, Othello, was referred as the green-eyed monster, who was so much in jealousy against his wife. There is also a famous idiom which goes on like this: green with envy. So green was associated with envy in the time of Shakespeare, and now in modern literature, green is the symbol of hope. It focuses on renewal, new beginnings. Woodfield was peering out of the green armchair by his friend, the boss's desk. How was he peering out? As a baby peers out of its pram. Pram is the small vehicle on four wheels which is used for young babies, which is usually pushed by a person. So the way Woodfield has been described as an old person. So we know that old age is also considered, old age is also considered as second childhood. And he peered out from that armchair, just the way a baby peers out of its pram. His talk was over. Mr. Woodyfield was having a conversation with his boss or with his friend. It was time for him to go off, but he did not want to go. Woodyfield did not want to leave the office. Since he had retired since his stroke. Woodyfield got a stroke due to some reason. The reason is not mentioned here. Since his last stroke, the wife and the girls kept him boxed up in the house every day of the week except Tuesday. Woodyfield was not allowed to get out of his house except for Tuesday. On Tuesday, he was dressed and brushed and allowed to get back to the city for the day. Tuesday was the happiest day in his life because he could go anywhere he wanted to. Though what he did there, the wife and the girls couldn't imagine. His family members had no idea how he would enjoy the day. He made a nuisance of himself to his friends. Nuisance means a person, thing, or situation which annoys or which creates trouble. He might create trouble to his friends, they supposed. They might think, well, perhaps so. It might happen. All the same, we cling to our last pleasures as the tree clings to its last leaves. There is again another simile in this line. We cling to our last pleasures as the tree clings to its last leaves. Our last pleasures. Udifil's last pleasures means his meeting with his friends. That is his pleasure. He loved to meet his friends. He loved to have a quality time with his friends, be happy in his life. And here is a comparison that we cling to our last pleasures as the tree to its last leaves. The way a tree holds the last leaf on its branches, on its branch. It is the same way we try our best to hold on to our last pleasure. There is a short story by O. Henry, The Last Leaf. If you want, you can read it. And here is the exact way the writer has said that how, by only seeing the last leaf on the branch of the tree, the person survives. Person is willing to live in this world. So there sat old Woodfield, smoking a cigar. Woodfield was smoking a cigar and staring almost greedily at the boss, who rolled in his office chair, stout, strong, rosy, 5 years older than he, and still growing strong, still at the helm. It did one good to see him. It was really a good thing to see the boss. Though the boss was 5 years older than Mr. Woodfield, still the boss was growing strong day by day. The boss had not given any name here. It is the universal boss who wants to be the supreme controller, who wants to be dominant, who wants to be admired in his life. Wistfully, admiringly, the old voice added, "It's snug in here, upon my word." Again Woodfield said, "It's snug in here. It's very comfortable here." "Yes, it's comfortable enough," agreed the boss. The boss agreed. And he flipped the Financial Times with a paper knife. Paper knives were very common essential desk accessories at that time, and these were used to avoid the ink stains. These were used to cut the uncut sections of the newspaper. And he was flipping the newspaper with that paper knife. As a matter of fact, he was proud of his rule. Who was proud? The boss was proud of his rule. He liked to have it admired. He's the boss. He's the controller. So he wants to be admired, especially by old Woodfield. It gave him a feeling of deep, solid satisfaction to be planted there in the midst of it. in full view of that frail old figure in the muffler. Woodfield was wearing the muffler. Woodfield was frail. He was old. And he was complimenting, he was admiring the room of the boss. And the boss enjoyed it so much. I have had it done up lately, he explained, as he had explained for the past. Woodfield said that, yeah, I have had done up lately. He used to get admired all the time. In past, he had also got admired by old Woodfield. How many? Weeks. New carpet. And the boss pointed to the bright red carpet with a pattern of large white rings. Bright red, the color which is associated with love and romance in the traditional literature. But in modern literature, especially in the post-war literature from 1918 to 1930, roughly, the literature of these years, the color is associated with the violent cost of innocent human lives, the butchery in the warfield, the industrialized slaughter of the soldiers. These are the things which is associated with the color red in modern literature, in post-war literature. And he drew Woodfield's attention to that bright red carpet with the pattern of large white rings. There is a sharp contrast, white, which is the symbol of peace, and red, which is symbolizing blood and fire. New furniture, and he nodded towards the massive bookcase and the table with legs like twisted turtle. He had also brought new furniture. Electric heating! He waved almost exultantly towards the 5 transparent pearly sausages glowing so softly in the tilted copper pan. There was also electric heating. He was drawing the attention of Woodfield. Why was he doing so? He's the boss. The office was his own. Like other bosses, he also wants to get admired, especially by his old friend, Mr. Woodfield. But he did not draw old Woodfield's attention to the photograph over the table of a grave-looking boy in uniform, standing in one of those spectral photographers' parks, with photographers' storm clouds behind him. He drew Woodfield's attention to almost everything except to the photograph, which was over the table. The photograph was of a grave-looking boy in uniform and was storm clouds behind him. Photographer storm clouds. This is the thing which the photographers used as textured studio backdrops. Okay. So there was a photograph over the table. It was not new. It had been there for over 6 years. For almost 6 years, the photograph was kept over the table in the same place, but he did not draw his attention. There was something I wanted to tell you, said old Woodfield, and his eyes grew dim, remembering. Woodfield is saying that, yeah, I wanted to tell you something. The moment he said that, his eyes grew dim. He was struggling to remember because he was old. Now, what was it? I had it in my mind when I started out this morning. His hands began to tremble and patches of red showed above his beard. He was trying very hard to remember the thing he had to share with the boss, but he could not remember that thing. Poor old chap, he's on his last pins, thought the boss. On his last pins means someone who is near the end of their life, someone who is very close to death. And feeling kindly, he winked at the old man and said jokingly, the boss says, say, I tell you what, I have got a little drop of something here that will do you good before you go out into the cold again. It's beautiful stuff. It wouldn't hurt a child. The boss assumes Mr. Woodfield as a child. He saw Woodfield as someone who is a frail figure, who is very old, though the boss is 5 years older than Woodfield, but he thinks about Woodfield and said that he had something which would help him to go out in the cold again. He took a key off his watch chain, unlocked a cupboard below his desk, and drew forth a dark squat bottle. He drew out a squat bottle. That's the medicine, said he. And the man from whom I got it told me it came from the cellars at Windsor Castle. Cellars, he's referring to the wine cellars, which are temperature controlled, and the underground room used to store wine. And they got that from Windsor Castle. That's the medicine. Old Woodifield's mouth fell open at the sight. Old Woodfield was mesmerized, was surprised. He couldn't have looked more surprised if the boss had produced a rabbit. So if the boss had produced a rabbit, that would be something very easier for Woodfield to believe. But he's unable to believe what he's seeing. It's whiskey, ain't it? He repeated. The boss turned the bottle and lovingly showed him the level. Whiskey it was. Do you know, said he, peering up at the boss wonderingly, they won't let me touch it at home. And he looked as though he was going to cry. He's saying they means the wife and the daughters of Woodfield. They would not allow him to touch it at home. Ah, that's where we know a bit more than the ladies, cried the boss. Swooping across for two tumblers that stood on the table, with a water bottle, pouring a generous finger into each. The boss made a remark that's why we know a bit more than the ladies. So this is a moment of male bonding. They were sharing their friendship, and somewhere they were trying to show that the male members of the family or the men somewhere knew a bit more than the villain. And then he poured the whiskey. Drink it down. It will do you good. And don't put any water with it. Do not add any water. Just have it. It's sacrilege to tamper with stuff like this. Ah, he's saying that just have it. Sacrilege means the disrespectful treatment of something that is considered sacred. Okay. And tamper with is to interfere. So it is something which is very sacred. So while we are having this wine, we should not be interrupted. Just have it. He tossed off his, pulled out his handkerchief, hastily wiped his moustaches, and cocked an eye at old Woodfield. Cocked an eye? He was expressing his curiosity. and the boss cocked an eye at Woodfield, who was rolling his in his chaps. The old man swallowed, was silent a moment, and then said faintly, "It's nothing. It's crazy or eccentric." But it warmed him. Yours warmed him. It crept into his chill old brain. He remembered. Chill brain, which is, it has various meanings. You can say that due to old age, he was behaving like that, or he was unbothered. He was having some unbothered mindset towards his life. It crept into his chill old brain. That was it, he said, heaving himself out of his chair. I thought you would like to know. The girls were in Belgium last week having a look at poor Reggie's grave, and they happened to come across your boys. They're quite near each other, it seems. Reggie was the son of old Woodfield, and the girls went in Belgium to have a look at Reggie's grave, and they come across your boys. They're quite near each other, it seems. Old Woodfield paused, but the boss made no reply. Only a quiver in his eyelids showed that he heard. He did not react with his mouth. He did not utter any word, but his eyelids quivered. The girls were delighted with the way the place is kept. The graveyard, how it was kept. Beautifully looked after. Couldn't be better if they were at home. We have not been across, have you yet? Have you been to that place? Holyfield was asking the boss. No, no. For various reasons, the boss had not been across. There are many reasons the boss did not went to have a look at the grave of his son. The photograph, which was over the table, was of the late son of the boss's. And the boss did not go there or didn't had a look at the grave of his son. There's miles of it, quavered old Footyfield, and it's all as neat as a garden. The graveyard was kept very neat and clean. It seemed like a garden, flowers growing on all the graves, nice broad paths. It was plain from his voice how much he liked a nice broad path. The pause came again. Then the old man, bright and wonderful. Do you know what the hotel made the girls pay for a pot of jam? He piped. 10 francs. Robbery, I call it. It was a little pot. So Gertrude says, no bigger than a half-crown. Gertrude is Udifil's daughter. And she hadn't taken more than a spoonful when they had charged her 10 francs. Gertrude brought the pot away with her to teach them a lesson. Quite right, too. It's a trading on our feelings. They think because we are over there having a look round, we are ready to pay anything. That's what it is. And he turned towards the door. Quite right, cried the boss. Holyfield delivered the speech. He said everything he had to say, and now the boss simply repeated, quite right. Thought what was quite, though what was quite right, he hadn't the least idea. The boss was not listening what Holyfield was saying. He was immersed in his own thoughts. He got stuck in his own thought process. He simply repeated, quite right. He came round by his desk, followed the shuffling footsteps to the door, and saw the old fellow out. Holyfield was gone. After saying all these things, Udipur left his office. For a long moment, the boss stayed, staring at nothing, while the grey-haired office messenger, watching him, dodged in and out of his cubbyhole like a dog that expects to be taken for a run. Another simile is here. Holyfield was, um, not Holyfield, the boss was moving. He was dodging in and out like a dog that expects to be taken for a run, which is ready to go out for a run. Who noticed these things? The gray-haired office messenger. Then, I'll see nobody for half an hour, said the boss. Understand? Nobody at all. So the office messenger, the gray-haired office messenger, was messy. And he ordered Messi that I'll see nobody for half an hour. He didn't want to meet anyone for half an hour. Very good, sir. The door shut. The firm, heavy steps. We crossed the bright carpet. The fat body, the fat body, plumped down in the spring chair, and leaning forward, the boss covered his face with his hands. He covered his face. He sat down. He plumped down in the spring chair. He wanted, he intended, he had arranged to be. One of the most famous lines in this short story. He wanted, he intended, he had arranged to be. He wanted, he had the desire in his heart. He intended, he had the full intention of weeping. He had arranged. He had to make the arrangements because he is the boss, and the boss would never want anyone see him crying. It had been a terrible shock to him when old Woodfield sprang up, sprang that remark upon him about the boy's grave. It gave him a terrible shock. What was the shock? The remark Woodfield made. It was exactly as though the earth had opened and we had seen the boy lying there with Woodfield's girls staring down at him. It felt very awkward for the boss when Woodfield said that my girls came across your son's grave. It seemed very awkward to him, as if he felt the earth had opened and the boy was lying there and the girls of Woodfields were staring down at him. For it was strange. Although 6 years had passed away, the boss never thought of the boy except as lying unchanged, unblemished in his uniform, asleep forever. This was the thought of the boss. The boss had only thought of his boy as someone who was lying unchanged because he was wearing his uniform, was unblemished, who was asleep forever. Nothing more than that. My son, groaned the boss, but no tears came yet. He was not crying, but simply he groaned, my son. In the past, in the first few months, and even years after the boy's death, he had only to say those words to be overcome by such grief that nothing short of a violent fit of weeping could relieve him. Even he had wept bitterly, he could have not overcome that loss. But he had not wept. He had only said those two words. whenever he felt burdened. My son, time, he had declared that. He had told everybody, could make no difference. Other men perhaps might recover, might live in their lost town, but not he. How was it possible? His boy was an only son. Ever since his birth, the boss had worked at building up this business for him. The boss wanted his son to join this business. It had no other meaning if it was not for the boy. The boy was not getting this business. The boy has gone forever. The boy is dead. So it has no other meaning. Life itself had come to have no other meaning. As if life is meaningless. Life had become meaningless to the boss. How on earth could he have slaved, denied himself, kept going all those years without the promise forever before him of the boy's stepping into his shoes and carrying on where he left off? The boss had a dream. He had slaved for years. He had denied himself so many times to be in this place, to make himself a boss, to be the controller. But what does this mean to him? For the person he had worked so hard is no more in this world. And that promise had been so near being fulfilled. The boy had been in the office learning the ropes for a year before the war. Learning the ropes means learning the basics of a new job. The boy came there in his office. The boy was learning the ropes. The boy was learning the rules and regulations for a year before the war. Every morning they had started off together. They had come back by the same train. And what congratulations he had received as the boy's father. How many congratulations he received. No wonder he had taken to it marvelously. As to his popularity with the staff, every man, jack of them down to old Messi, couldn't make enough of the boy. And he wasn't the least spoiled. No, he was just his bright natural self. He was his bright natural self. He was very bright. He was natural. With the right word for everybody. With that boyish look and his habit of saying, "Simple, splendid." He used to say that time and again. He loved to say that. He loved to use the exact word, the right word with everyone. But all that was over and done. As though it never had been. It seemed that it had never happened. The day had come when Messi had handed him the telegram that brought the whole place crashing about his head. Deeply regret to inform him, and he had left the office a broken man, with his life in ruins. Everything is broken, everything is shattered. The world he was trying to live in, the dream he had in his eyes, the son for whom he had worked like a slave, is no more in this world. Everything seemed shattered. He left the office as a broken man. 6 years ago, 6 years. How quickly time passed. It might have happened yesterday. It seems like something that happened yesterday. The boss took his hands from his face. He was puzzled. Something seemed to be wrong with him. Something was wrong. He wasn't feeling as he wanted to feel. He decided to get up and have a look at the boy's photograph. He wanted to have a look at that photograph. That was the boy's photograph. But it wasn't a favorite photograph of his. He did not like that photograph. When we do not like a photograph, we do not love to take a look at it. Why he didn't like that? Because the expression was unnatural. It was cold, even stern looking. The boy had never looked like that. It seemed that it was very stern, it was very cold. How could a father look at the photograph of his dead son? At that moment, the boss noticed that a fly had fallen into his broad ink pot. A fly fallen into the ink pot and was trying feebly but desperately to clamber out again. Fly, which was traveling into the ink pot, trying very hard to clamber out of it. Help, help, said those struggling legs. As if those legs were begging for help. But the sides of the ink pot were wet and slippery. It fell back again and began to swim. The boss took up a pen, picked the fly out of the ink, and shook it onto a piece of blotting paper. Shook it on the highly absorbent paper so that it might get recovered. For a fraction of a second, it lay still on the dark patch that oozed round it. When the front legs waved, it started waving its front legs, took hold, and pulling its small sodden body up. Sodden body, the body which is waterlogged or heavy with moisture. Here it is not waterlogged because he fell into the ink pot, not into water. It was heavy with moisture. It was the sodden body of the fly. It began the immense task of cleaning the ink from its wings. It started to clean its wings, over and under. Went a leg along a way as the stone goes over and under the skid. It's a long curved harvesting tool that is traditionally used to cut down the grass. To sharpen the skid, a farmer manually sweeps it in a over and under motion along both sides of the plate's edges. The fly's front leg has been compared to a skid. Then there was a pause, while the fly, seeming to stand on the tips of toes, tried to expand first one wing, then the other. It succeeded at last. Sitting down, it began, like a minute cat, to clean its face. It was cleaning its face. Now one could imagine that the little front legs rubbed against each other lightly, joyful. The horrible danger was over. The danger was gone. It was over. It had escaped. It was ready for life again. The fly thought that he had survived the danger. Now he could live his life. But just then, the boss had an idea. This is another important line in this short story. What was the idea? He plunged his pen back into the ink. Plunged into means to be suddenly, forcefully, and violently thrust into a specific space, into that ink pot. Leaned his thick wrist on the blotting paper, and as the fly tried its wings down, came a great heavy blot. What would it make of that? What indeed? The little beggar, the little beggar seemed absolutely cowed, stunned, and afraid to move because of what would happen next. The fly has been compared as the little beggar. It was so much frightened, cowed means frightened, It was stunned, afraid to move. He had a tension what would happen. But then, as if painfully, it dragged itself painfully. The second time he did, it was very pathetic scene. It dragged itself forward. The front legs waved, caught hold, and more slowly this time, the task began from beginning. Again, he did the same thing to get recovered from this sodden bed of ink. He's a plucky little devil. Plucky means someone who is showing determined courage. The fly was showing courage, but he was a devil, thought the boss, and he felt a real admiration for the fly's courage. He admired the courage of the fly. That was the way to tackle things. That was the right spirit. Never said I. It was only a question of. But the fly had again finished its laborious task. It had finished the task. And the boss had just time to refill his pen. To refill his pen. To shake fair and square on the new clean body. Yet another dark drop. He had to. Fair and square means direct. It was not any hidden activity. He planned to shake the fair and square directly on the new cleaned body. Another dark drop. What about it this time? A painful moment of suspense followed. But behold, the front legs were again waving. The boss felt a rush of relief. He leaned over the fly and said to it tenderly, "You artful little." And he actually had the brilliant notion of breathing on it to help the drying process. He was breathing over the fly so that it might get dried quickly. He helped in the drying process. All the same, there was something timid and weak about its efforts now. Its efforts were timid. It was weak. And the boss decided that this time should be the last, as he dipped the pen deep into the ink pot. It was. The last blot fell on the soaked blotting paper. The blotting paper, it had already soaked the ink. And the draggled fly, the the messy fly, because of the ink, the fly lay in it and did not stir. The back legs were stuck to the body. The front legs were not to be seen. "Come on," said the boss. "Look sharp." Look sharp means hurry up. And he stirred it with his pen. In vain. Nothing happened or was likely to happen. The fly was dead. The boss lifted the corpse. How did Mansfield mention the dead body of the fly? The corpse. On the end of the paper knife and flung it into the waste paper basket. But such a grinding feeling of wretchedness, exhausted feeling of deep unhappiness that seized him that he felt positively frightened. He killed the fly intentionally, but he was feeling frightened. He was being overwhelmed by the pressure, by the feeling of exhaustion, by the feeling of anxiety, that he was finding himself in deep misery, immeasurable situation. He started forward and pressed the bell for Messi. "Bring me some fresh blotting paper." What was the indication of this activity? He might do many other things like this in future. He said sternly, "And look sharp about it. Hurry up." And while the old dog padded away, he fell to wondering what it was he had been thinking about before. When Messi went to bring some fresh blotting paper. The boss was struggling to remember what exactly he was thinking before. What was it? It was, he remembered. He took out his handkerchief and passed it inside his collar, because he was waiting. For the life of him, he could not remember, but he did not want to remember. And the boss is the universal one. He also wants to take control of those things which is beyond his control. The boss who had lost his son in the war, he watched the activity of that plucky little devil or the beggar who fought so hard, who fought till death, who had the resolution, who had the resilience to fight back in the pressurized circumstances. But the fly failed to save its life, just the way the soldiers who went into the battlefield to fight for their nation failed to save their own life. They get slaughtered on the warfield. They tried their best, but all in vain. Boss's friend Udifil had also lost his son, but the response was very different. The reaction of the boss was very different from Udifil's.